everyone, welcome to Ask an Armourer. My name's Kia and today I'm going to be showing you what to do to diagnose an epee that isn't showing any lights at all. Now, please keep in mind that while I have tried to cover most common causes of this problem in this video, it is not going to be able to be a fully comprehensive list just because there's always something weird and wonderful that can possibly pop up. But this should cover about 90 to 95% of the root causes that I have seen. Now, if you recall from my video on how an epee works, it's a very basic circuit in that the tip button acts as a switch. So therefore, when the button is up, the circuit is open and there is no light. However, when the button is depressed, the circuit is closed and a light comes on. So we can use this information to our advantage and basically, as we're going through this diagnosis, look for any area that would basically make the circuit think it is constantly open all the time. Now, before we begin, please note that I have already assumed that the issue is isolated to the epee and isn't anywhere else along in the circuit, the body cord, the reel, etc. And for this diagnosis, all you're going to need is the epee in question, a body cord that you know works, and a test box. Now, I'm going to be using this older one from Absolute here, but any of them will work so long as you're comfortable with it. All right, now let's get started. So, as with any diagnosis that I do, I will start at the tip and work my way down the blade to look into the bell guard. This is just for me personally to make sure that I actually cover all of the possible areas and don't inadvertently miss something because I skipped a step. If this works for you, feel free to follow along exactly, or whatever other method works for you is fine, so long as you are indeed looking at all of the possibilities. So with that in mind, let's begin at the tip. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to twist the barrel. Oop. And this one you can actually, maybe you can see it is moving a little bit on me. So that's going to be a problem that I have to address when I go to do the repairs on this one. And since I can move this barrel, there is a good chance that the wire underneath is actually broken. And if this is the case, then you just have to rewire the epee, as there's no real way to fix that without doing the entire rewire. And obviously, if a wire is broken, it means that the circuit simply cannot be completed as there is no second path for the circuit to follow. However, if the barrel feels secure, it is time to investigate the insides of the barrel. So all you're going to need to do is remove the screws and the tip button to start looking at this. And if you've seen any of my other diagnostics videos, you'll be well aware of the fact that tip button movement is really good at pulling dirt, sweat, general amounts of grime and dust into the barrel, and all of this can start coating the inside of the barrel as well as the tip button and spring inside of there, and generally cause a lot of issues. So if you're not seeing any light at all, it could possibly mean that there is a significant enough coating of gross inside the barrel that it is preventing that contact from being initiated. So all you need to do is take a Q-tip and some acetone and just swab around in there to remove anything that might be there. If this is the case, you may have to do this a few times, depending on how much dirt and gunk has gotten built up. So after I've cleaned out the barrel, I'll test again to see if this has helped at all, and if not, it's time to keep moving. So the second thing that I look at while I'm inside the barrel is the contact spring. That's the smaller of the two springs inside the barrel, the larger one being the weight spring, but we can just put that aside for now. So if you're not seeing any light, it is possible that the contact spring, just through general use and fatigue, has gotten compressed and therefore isn't actually long enough after the tip button has been depressed to contact the two ends of the wire inside the cap. If this is the case, you can try just very gently stretching the wire a little bit, not too much. You want to be careful on this so that you don't now fail the gauge test, but you can stretch that out a little bit and that may solve the problem, as now the button is actually able to make contact. Another thing to look at with the contact spring is if it's actually become misshapen. Sometimes inadvertently it can get angled so that it's touching the side of the barrel rather than making contact with the wire springs, in which case you'll probably just have to replace it entirely, as once it's gotten deformed, it's really hard to get it to actually go back and have a nice straight path anymore. So if this is the case, all you need to do is pull that small spring off of the end of the button. There'll be like a little screw for it to hold onto, and then just get a new one. They're really cheap at any of the manufacturers. Make sure you get one that actually fits with your tip button style, and you just gently screw it on. And again, you're going to want to be careful when you do this that you strike that balance between passing the gauge test but also allowing your epee to actually fully function. So it may take a few minutes of adjustment before this settles in. And after all of this, if your blade is still not coming on, it's time to move on from the tip and take a look down the blade itself. Now, I recommend having a really good light source for this, as we're looking at some potentially very small defects. But basically, I'm just going to look very carefully down the entire length of the wire, and I'm going to look for anywhere that the wire is broken, or if the insulation has gotten stripped, if the wires have actually crossed over each other, if the wires have popped out, anything like that that would indicate that the wire or the insulation on it has been compromised, as both of those would lead to the circuit not being able to be completed properly and no light coming on. So in this case, yeah, we can see right up here both a little bit of an area where it's popped, as well as I can see that the insulation has gotten damaged. Here the wire has gotten crossed over itself, which can cause some micro abrasions between those two just as the blade flexes. And all the way down at the bottom here, we have a large area where the wire's gotten popped. So I'm guessing at the end of this, I'm just going to have to rewire this entire epee, but that makes it a good one for demonstration purposes. Now, in the case that you do see anywhere that the wire is broken or the insulation is damaged, it will just mean that you have to rewire the epee. There's really no way to repair those otherwise. And the reason I say that a crossed wire might be an issue, again, as I mentioned briefly earlier, is that might cause micro abrasions to happen in the insulation between the wires, as the wire is sort of forced to bend over itself and rub against each other as the blade undergoes normal fencing movement. Which is why when you rewire an epee, it's important to try to make sure that the wires stay parallel to each other in the groove, as opposed to getting twisted around each other. Now, the final thing that I will do is look inside the bell guard, and first I'm going to start by just pulling up the pad and looking at the wires underneath there. And with this, I'm looking for anywhere that the wires might have gotten pinched underneath the handle inadvertently. If your handle is loose, maybe it got pulled under there, or if, again, any of the spaghetti wire has gotten damaged anyway, because either of those will probably indicate you'll have to do a rewire. Again, the wire is compromised or the insulation is compromised. That just needs rewires, just how you fix that. And finally, if the wires inside the bell guard look to be okay, I will look at the wires at the connector end. So again, a possible reason that you might not be getting a light is if the circuit just is not able to be completed. And what possibly could be causing this is if one or both of the wires at the connector have fallen out. Again, during normal fencing movement, these can sometimes come loose and the wire just comes out. So if this is the case, all you need to do is rewrap that wire around and tighten it down to make sure that it is a really secure connection again. Or if the wires do seem to be secure, what might have happened is there's still a layer of clear glue insulating the wire itself. We've talked about before how there are two forms of insulation on most wires. A outer layer that's typically made of like a cloth or a paper material, and that's typically red or blue, but then also a clear layer of glue that would be holding on that second layer that is harder to remove because of course it's clear, it's harder to see. So if everything else looks good, you might want to try opening up these connection pins a little bit and re-sanding down the both ends of the wire until it is really bright, shiny copper, and you can tell that you've removed any of that glue. And with that, those are all of the major areas that I have seen that would cause the problem of an epee not showing any lights. Now, again, this is not a comprehensive list, so if none of these seem to have solved the issue, you may just have to rewire the epee as there is a break somewhere that isn't visible to the human eye. So I've linked the repair videos that I have for all of these issues in the description down below. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, if you have any questions, comments, or other topics you'd like me to cover, let me know down below. See you in the next one. Bye.